caring for our land. Growing our essentials. Cultivating our future. Every producer leaves a legacy. Our amazing grasslands.
My farm is located southwest of White Lake, South Dakota. We did homestead, I think, around 1884, the Suelflow family, and then it's just kind of come through the generations. My parents still live on the farm. My wife and 3 kids and I live in town, still in White Lake. I've been farming probably for about 9 years now. About 3 years ago, I started full-time farming on my own here. When I started farming, I did want to find a way to integrate the livestock back into the crop ground. I've been starting to graze standing corn in the winter, and if I'm short of grass and I have to get off my grass so I don't overgraze it, I just save more corn. I've found it's a very cost-effective way to feed your cattle. I do usually supplement with 1 or 2 alfalfa bales a week. I just roll it out to them. So I do supplement a little bit of protein, but other than that, they're just basically grazing the corn and digging through the corn stalks. I have 3 different groups of pastures, and there's several smaller pastures within each group. And I try to rest one group for the full growing season, and then I graze the other 2 groups. And then the next spring I come back and graze the one that I rested early in the spring, and then I usually get multiple grazings off of that one. My production the next spring is quite a bit more than the other pastures. So it makes up for what I was losing the year before by not grazing it. I feel like it gives some of the native species a full year break to maybe get more established.
What Reed and his family are doing here is they're not only protecting these grasslands and maintaining them in these large blocks that are attractive to birds and wildlife, but they're also managing them in a way that we have these undisturbed blocks for nesting. We have disturbed blocks that allow foraging and display behavior for grouse and other species. And you just see that mix of habitats, and we have an official name, I guess. It's called heterogeneity of habitat. And a rotational grazing system usually provides the best mix of those habitats versus a continuous grazing system where typically you see those habitats are more homogeneous across the landscape.
He's starting to realize a lot of benefits from that increase in native plant diversity. And I think a lot of that can be tied back to the fact that he's grazing pastures at different times each year. He's leaving residue, he's not overgrazing, he's keeping minimum plant heights for plant health and vigor. And he's providing a recovery time, so any time spent is very short. He's giving those plants a long time for recovery to occur.
Another thing with the diversity in the pastures I've been seeing is not just the diversity in the plants, but I've seen a lot of dung beetles this year, which I haven't really seen in the past. And I think that's helped controlling my flies, that with different bird species that are helping to control the flies. My farm is finally starting to perform more like an ecosystem, like I'm trying to get it to. The farther you get along in rotational grazing or more intensive grazing, it seems to me like the plant stand gets thicker. There's just not as much opportunity for weeds to get started. So they just kind of get choked out by competition, and if they germinate, they'll probably end up dying. They just don't have an opportunity to express themselves, I guess. I've grown cover crops now for the last 4 years. I plant cover crops after my small grain harvest. The last few years I've tried full season cover crops just for the purpose of grazing. I've tried actually planting a cover crop in the spring, grazing it in the spring as well, and then planting another crop into it as well. So I've tried that. I would like to increase the organic matter up to what it's supposed to be when this was all prairie. I got to do a little more research to see what this was at before it got settled. With proper management, I think people can exceed that.
What Reed is doing here is he's getting organic matter back into the soil. If you can increase organic matter in your soil, you're insuring yourself against drought. You capture more rainfall, and when you capture more rainfall, you increase your total production. The resulting in that total production is going to be beneficial to his livestock and his bottom line.
Reed has been a great example to use when I'm doing the planting process with others too. Maybe a full season cover crop will come up in a conversation or during the planting process, and I'm able to use Reed as a contact for them or an example. He's done a lot with his grazing, not as conventional, he's more high intensive grazing, and that's not something that everybody uses on a daily basis. He's been really helpful in helping me learn to pass this message on to others.
These grasslands developed in a certain way with disturbance, and there was a plan here that there was an order in place, and it was working very well to maintain this landscape and take care of all of the little things from, you know, birds and bees and other insects to water and grasslands. And what he's trying to do here is he's really trying to restore that balance and bring back that connection between all of those different small pieces so that this area, this farm really functions not only for him but also for the wildlife and for just society at large also, to provide a number of benefits.
Having kids definitely makes me think about what I'm doing to the land. I mean, I want it to be in better shape than what I took over, and I want to instill on them the principle of conservation and soil health, so they hopefully will take it to another level and continue where I'm starting, I guess.
Hats off to the Suelflow Ranch for integrating livestock back into their cropping grounds, restoring ecosystem balance. Grazing standing corn, now that's an old school idea, perhaps worth revisiting. Since 1884, that outfit has seen a lot of changes, but it sure looks like they're in good hands for many generations to come. If you like beautiful rolling hills and pristine South Dakota ranch country, you're not going to want to miss the next segment. With lease ground from the Cheyenne Sioux tribe, this is not only one of the prettiest ranches that we've ever been to, but it's also increasing the amount of cattle they can run by proactively managing their grazing.
We live 18 miles west of Cherry Creek, South Dakota here. Second generation rancher on this place. My mom and dad obtained this lease down here from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe in the late 60s. And they raised 7 kids here, and I was the youngest. And in 2003, I took over the lease and began to operate it. And you know, growing up, we had horses and cattle, and it was a lot bigger country then. I think it was just 2 big pastures of the whole place, and so it was a lot different back then. Mom taught me to love, Dad taught me how to work hard. You know, back in the day, one thing that I really point out is that way back in the 70s when rural water came into our area, Dad and had him install a couple pasture taps, and didn't have the money to utilize that, but it was here for me to do something with. And so everything that we've been done is, it goes back to those 2 pasture taps that we could, you know, utilize and take the lines out from there. We are a cow-calf operation. We calve out in the spring.
We used to calve in February, and that was always an extremely cold time. We had a lot of difficulty with getting to the cattle if we had a lot of snow, trying to save the calves, and we decided to switch to April-May calving.
We usually wean and sell calves in the fall, usually first part of October. In 2006, we had a really tough drought. water was very scarce and our dams weren't good. And so I reached out to the NRCS office because I heard that they could help with some water lines. You know, when I did it originally, I did it for, I will say, selfish reasons, because I just needed water for my cows. You know, I visited with them and they came down and we got to talking at the first initial visit, and, you know, started educating myself on conservation and how you can, you know, change what you have and utilize it so much better with conservation practices. Putting water where we need it with water lines, doing shelter belts, also cross fencing. Had never heard about rotating cattle before and with the benefits of that. And so over the next year, really sat down and looked and educated myself on how can we make this place the best that it can be.
You know, I've learned more from my producers like Bo, just through the years of different conservation practices than I've learned almost anywhere else.
I've learned a lot from Dad and a lot just from other people about the importance of cross fencing. I've learned that it's really good for the environment. You can utilize every section of the pasture and they're not just kind of staying in one bunch and kind of using up that land.
The cross fencing has been tremendous once we got it in place, because we can put cows in there for 21 days and they'll utilize more of the pasture, and then you kick them in the next place and they have fresh grass. One of the first things I really noticed was erosion around the dams, because with more watering places they're not concentrated on the best dam and with the water tanks. So the erosion stopped around the dams. They're utilizing all corners of the pasture. The land's repairing itself in those, you know, places that were eaten down around the best dams. The soil that we have here is a shale, and it erodes, especially, you know, dam grades and stuff like that, or high traffic areas. It'll get to running and will wash out, you know, pretty quick. With the more places to water our cattle, and we, you know, was very careful in where we placed the water tanks, and so it has really helped that way.
I noticed with Bo, it was a learning process for both of us. He kind of had an idea what might work and definitely what wouldn't work down here. It's very unique. You know, we developed plans, and I think it's been a great success. You know, going from 2 pastures to 8. You know, it sure has helped things. You know, I've seen the health of the rangeland greatly improve. You know, Bo's talked about many different things that he has noticed has changed over the past, you know, 10 years. With the Bendigo ranch down here, it's mostly on tribal ground, tribal lease with the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. It's managed by the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They kind of come up with a stocking rate, grazing plans. You know, they're pretty good about listening to what you want to do. As far as your rotation, you know, you can only run so many head of cattle for so long.
You know, with the practices, after about 5 years, we went up, I think it was 44 head we could run more year round. And just talking to the land specialists, they'd like to readdress that again because we've made more practices since then. So it's getting better, you know, all the time.
It's kind of a rarity to see people want to improve the land because they see the bigger picture. I mean, there's only so much land on this earth, and we have to improve it the best we can, not only for ourselves but the next generation.
My grandpa was a Pearl Harbor survivor and was getting out of the military, and his soon-to-be father-in-law thought he needed something to do when he got out of the military. So they bought the original place here. That was in '47. My grandpa ran it, and my dad took over early 70s, and then I took over in 2010 full-time. My dad and grandfather did a great job setting this place up for rotational grazing. They always did the take half, leave half. I take it a little bit farther. Like they used to have 4 different groups of cattle. I want to get to just 1 group of cattle, and right now I have 2, because we can't really cross fence it any more than it already is without a lot of labor. We can just put more cattle in the pastures for a short amount of time and just move them faster.
He's doing what's best for his ranch, and he recognizes that. And that all started with getting a good ranch inventory done on his place, and Dave Steffen helped him immensely with that. And you quickly realize when you're doing an inventory on a ranch like this, because of the ruggedness of the terrain, there's a lot of limitations, especially if you're wanting to set up a rotational grazing system. And what John has figured out is what that threshold is for him and what's going to work best for his ranch.
4 years ago in September, I went to the South Dakota Grazing School up in Chamberlain. I was just kind of on a whim. I was trying to figure out how I can improve this ranch, how I can make it more efficient. And I went up there with one question in mind. I had really bad worms killing my sod. And there was no rhyme or reason, and I still don't have an answer for that. They still don't know. On the south-facing slope, on my pastures, it'll be completely dead, and nothing comes but thistles. And it's June bug worms, I guess. There's no rhyme or reason if it's overgrazed, undergrazed, not grazed at all. It doesn't matter. It's just in different spots throughout the ranch, and it was upsetting me because I don't want to spray more thistles than I already do. I didn't really get that answered there. But what I learned with the rotational grazing there, that it doesn't matter if it does happen, it'll correct itself if you follow your grazing plan. There were some areas that I sprayed the thistles, then cheatgrass came, and I got cows in there and they ate that cheatgrass off when it was young, and now it's all back to native grass and you wouldn't even know what happened. So the grazing school, I didn't know what to expect when I went there, and then when we go out and have to figure out animal units with cattle out there and a little electric fence and then learning plants and stuff, I loved it. Still, I drive around our place and look at grasses and teaching my boys the grasses and stuff. Then I did the follow-up program with Dave, and I'm gonna make Sean keep coming to actually incorporate your grazing plan and take your knowledge that you learn there. And I mean, it's a 3-day course and it's all day. And it's a lot to take in. So with that follow-up program, you get to slow it down a little bit and actually implement it into your place. So it was great. I learned a lot.
When I met John, I knew right away he was at the grazing school for a purpose. He wanted to learn, and you know, that makes our job so much easier when you got somebody who's real passionate about what they're trying to accomplish.
It's changed how he has been able to say, I need more water, or I need to stop putting the cattle here this year. He's super aware of what he needs to do and when he needs to do it because he knows what the grasses are doing.
We have 54 tanks on the place that my dad and I have built on. So our water situation is amazing. We're very fortunate that in the early 90s, my dad put in the initial pipeline, and I just redid it last year. It allows us to fare a drought quite fine. There's a main well up on top that it's stupid deep. They pump it to the surface there and then it free flows throughout the ranch. And there's 28 tanks off that well. It's all artesian water, so it's good water. And on the east side of the ranch, we have rural water pasture taps. All the tanks run off them. My dad and my grandfather never cut a cedar on the place. They didn't have any back in the day. They just been exploding the past 15 years. For a long time, we just did it on our own, just cutting cedars, trying to get ahead of it, because if I don't get something done, the boys are just gonna have a nightmare on their hands. So we started just shearing with a tractor, then we've moved on to skid loaders and shears, and now we're gonna do a big burn.
He's right in the heart of the river breaks here, and this is, you know, some of the roughest country in the state. And so The area that he wanted to burn on his ranch, we quickly found out it would be a much easier and a much safer burn if we could incorporate 3 more landowners and do, we call them a landscape burn, where we can utilize natural fire breaks so we don't have to put a lot of labor and ground disturbance into cutting fire breaks just to burn his section of the ranch.
We work with the Mid-Missouri Burn Association that some local ranchers started, Rich and Sarah Grimm and Dave Steffen, and a bunch of them started this because their cedars are a way worse problem. If we don't do something now, that's what ours is going to look like. They've been battling it for years along the Missouri River there. They have entire pastures that they can't even run cattle in down there because there's no grass left. And we're starting to see that we're losing the grass to the cedars, and so we want to try to control that before we get as bad as they have gotten out there.
We have 2 very rambunctious boys. We have a 11-year-old Dale and a 9-year-old Tucker. Their dad has become this grass nerd, and he's so aware of what's going on around him in the ground that the boys have taken this huge interest in trying to keep the ground healthy, and they actually are turning more into like botanists and environmentalists, not just ranch kids and not just ranchers. So they're really aware of the ground around them, and their dad is sharing that knowledge so that they end up with more information to make this place better than what they inherit it with.
The natural resources are the foundation of your ranch. You got to take care of those first, and to see that that knowledge is being spread to everybody on this ranch is really exciting.
What a neat ranch in central South Dakota. To be able to have 54 watering tanks and a grazing rotation that intense in that rough of a country is truly inspiring. Hopefully, they can continue to keep the cedars at bay and continue to enhance all of their natural resources.